Hello, everybody. Mr. Howard again. Happy quarantining and ready for Chapter 3 of The Picture of Dorian Gray Read Aloud with Analysis. Um, Here I am again down in my guest room. If the camera shakes today, it's not my fault. It's on the bed where it's sitting on. There's my dog Bee anyway. She's here with us down here, and she may scratch herself or something, and then the whole bed will shake and probably get a little bit of camera movement. Oh well. That's how it goes. It's nice to have the company, and I don't mind. So we're going to do Chapter 3 of Dorian Gray. Before we do Chapter 3 of Dorian Gray, let's talk a little bit, recap last time on The Picture of Dorian Gray. Like Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a really important chapter, one of the most important chapters in the book, and lots of things go on. We meet Dorian Gray for the first time. We see sort of his willful, petulant, sort of youth-like manner, his ignorance at the beginning of the chapter, and that ignorance is disrupted by the influence of Lord Henry. He warns us that to influence one is to give one their own soul, and so they become an echo of someone else's music. And this is exactly what happens to Dorian. He warns him about influence, and then he proceeds to influence him. He influences him in a couple of ways. He tries to convince him that morality can be circumvented with intellect. He tries to convince him that youth is the only thing that matters in life, and then he convinces him about this philosophy of his called a new hedonism, to cure the soul by means of the senses and the senses by means of the soul. And these influences infect, I guess is the word I want to use, Dorian's psyche and his thought process, allowing Basil to capture a picture of him that is simultaneously innocent and what is the opposite of that? Innocent and sort of awakened, aware. So he's become self-aware through Lord Henry's intellectual ideas, but he still has all the candor, all the beauty, all the unspoiled innocence in his appearance of youth. And in front of the picture, Dorian made this wild wish that the picture would age and not him, and he offered to give his own soul for that, which of course is interesting because we've got an allegory going on, right? Lord Henry, it's a Satan figure, and he went out into the garden with Dorian and sipped strawberry drinks and dropped this bomb on him, this knowledge bomb, if you will. And so clearly, the allegory is sort of taking off here. Basil asks Dorian not to go with Lord Henry, and Dorian goes with him anyway, showing a change of allegiance and in friendship at the end of the chapter. And so lots of stuff goes on, and we could talk about a lot of our themes. You clearly see that Basil's a romantic. He's idealistic. He thinks the best in people, all of that. You clearly see that Lord Henry's a realist. He only thinks about the surface. He talks about the realities of getting older and stuff like that. He dismisses morality as a romantic or ideal sort of null-sum game. We can look at all of those themes that we've been talking about, but I don't want to overload you with analysis when I already went through the analysis last chapter. Ideally, though, you start to think about those things, and you can stop and you can see sort of the trajectory the story's starting to take and what's going on. Chapter 3 is sort of it's a Lord Henry chapter, primarily. You see him as he walks around London and thinks about what's going on and interacts with different people. And it builds backstory. It does a little of that character development, actually for Dorian Gray, mostly. And for Henry himself through his own thoughts and actions. So I'm going to read you chapter 3, and then I'll upload it, and we'll call today's reading done. Chapter 3 of The Picture of Dorian Gray. At 12:30 the next day, Lord Henry Wotton strolled from Curzon Street over to the Albany to call on his uncle, Lord Fermor, a genial if somewhat rough-mannered old bachelor, whom the outside world called selfish because it derived no particular benefit from him, but who was considered generous by society as he fed the people who amused him. His father had been our ambassador at Madrid when Isabella was young, and prim unthought of, but had retired from the diplomatic service in a capricious moment of annoyance on not being offered the embassy at Paris, a post to which he considered that he was fully entitled by reason of his birth, his indolence, the good English of his dispatches, and his inordinate passion for pleasure. The son, who had been his father's secretary, had resigned along with his chief, somewhat foolishly as was thought at the time, and on succeeding some months later to the title, had set himself to the serious study of the great aristocratic art of doing absolutely nothing. He had 2 large townhouses, but preferred to live in chambers as it was less trouble, and took most of his meals at the club. He paid some attention to the management of his collieries, that's, coal mines. B, you gonna lay down there, dog, or what? Of his collieries in the Midland counties, excusing himself for this taint of industry on the ground that the one advantage of having coal was that it enabled a gentleman to afford the decency of burning wood in his own hearth. In politics, he was a Tory, except when the Tories were in power, during which period he roundly abused them as being a pack of radicals. He was a hero to his valet, who bullied him, and a terror to most of his relations, whom he bullied in his own turn. Only England could have produced him, and he always said that the country was going to the dogs. His principles were out of date, but there was a good deal to be said for his prejudices. All right, so this description of Lord... I already forgot his name. Lord Fermor, who's Henry's uncle. Stop. Nobody wants to listen to it. Stop. I'm going to kick you out. Yeah. All right. Here, you can watch my conversation. I'm going to kick you out. You just got to sit and be quiet. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. All right. Sorry. Back to it. Lord Fermor, see, this is kind of like being in class, getting interrupted. I'm kind of enjoying it. This is how it goes in my classroom. Students ask questions. I lose my train of thought. I have to get back to it. Maybe B's helping us out here. Her name's Miss Bennett, by the way. I don't know if I said that entirely. She's an allusion to Pride and Prejudice, for those of you that know that book. Anyway, Lord Fermor is a caricature. He's a direct social commentary on British aristocracy. And, when you go through his entire description, he's settled into the great aristocratic task of doing nothing. I mean, come on, what is Oscar Wilde saying here? That he's extreme conservative and he hates hates the liberals, except when the conservatives are in power, and then he hates them too, so he hates all government. I mean, I think there's some really good things being said here. He has coal, and he claims that the only good excuse for having coal is that it allows you to burn wood in your own fireplace. I mean, the hypocrisy of that, so there's lots of little details here that Wilde uses to develop the idea of what an aristocrat is. Anyway, when Lord Henry entered the room, he found his uncle sitting in a rough shooting coat, smoking a cheroot and grumbling over the Times. "Well, Harry," said the old gentleman, "what brings you out so early? I thought you dandies never got up till 2, and were not visible till 5. "Pure family affection, I assure you, Uncle George. I want to get something out of you." "Money, I suppose," said Lord Fermor, making a wry face. "Well, sit down and tell me about it. Young people nowadays imagine that money is everything." "Yes," murmured Lord Henry, settling his buttonhole in his coat. "And when they grow older, they know it. But I don't want money. It is only people who pay their bills who want that, Uncle George, and I never pay mine. Credit is the capital of a younger son, and one lives charmingly upon it. Besides, I always deal with Dartmoor's tradesmen, and consequently they never bother me. What I want is information. Not useful information, of course. Useless information." Dartmoor, of course, is Lord Henry's older brother, so he always deals with Dartmoor's people, and that way they make Dartmoor pay the bills. Dartmoor's going to inherit everything. "Well, I can tell you anything that's in an English blue book, Harry, although these fellows nowadays write a lot of nonsense. When I was in the diplomatic, things were much better, but I hear they let them in now by examination." "What can you expect? Examinations, sir, are pure humbug from beginning to end. If a man is a gentleman, he knows quite enough, and if he is not a gentleman, whatever he knows is bad for him." "Mr. Dorian Gray does not belong in the blue books, Uncle George," said Lord Henry languidly. "Mr. Dorian Gray? Who's he?" asked Lord Fermor, knitting his bushy white eyebrows. "And that is what I came to learn, Uncle George. Or rather, I know who he is. He is the last Lord Kelso's grandson. His mother was a Devereux, Lady Margaret Devereux. I want you to tell me about his mother. What was she like? Whom did she marry? You have known nearly everybody in your time, so you might have known her. I am very much interested in Mr. Gray at present. I have only just met him." Kelso's grandson, echoed the old gentleman. Kelso's grandson, of course. I knew his mother intimately. I believe I was at her christening. She was an extraordinarily beautiful girl, Margaret Devereux, and made all the men frantic by running away with a penniless young fellow, a mere nobody, a subaltern in a foot regiment or something of that kind. Certainly I remember the whole thing as if it happened yesterday. The poor chap was killed in a duel at Spa a few months after the marriage. There was an ugly story about it. They said Kelso got some rascally adventurer, some Belgian brute, to insult his son-in-law in public. Paid him, sir, to do it. Paid him, and that the fellow spitted the man as if he had been a pigeon. The thing was hushed up, but egad, Kelso ate his chop alone at the club for some time afterwards. He brought his daughter back with him, I was told, and she never spoke to him again. Oh, yes, it was a bad business. The girl died, too. Died within a year. So she left a son, did she? I had forgotten that. What sort of boy is he? If he's like his mother, he must be a good-looking chap. Pause. This is Dorian Gray's backstory, obviously. And it's sort of romantic, like when you think about it. So Dorian Gray's mother was a wealthy British woman, a Devereux, and she married a private, essentially, in the military, and they ran off to Spa, a resort town in Belgium, where her dad, Lord Kelso, hired an assassin to insult, get in a duel with, and murder this young infantryman who she was married to. And then he brought her back to England. Apparently she had a son, and she died shortly thereafter, and that son is Dorian Gray. So it gives you this romantic backstory of Dorian himself. He is very good-looking, asserted Lord Henry. I hope he will fall into proper hands, continued the old man. He should have a pot of money waiting for him if Kelso did the right thing by him. His mother had money, too. All the Selby property came to her through her grandfather. Her grandfather hated Kelso, thought him a mean dog. He was, too. Came to Madrid once when I was there. Egad, I was ashamed of him. The Queen used to ask me about the Englishman, Noble, who was always quarreling with the cabmen about their fares. They made quite a story of it. I didn't dare show my face at court for a month. I hope he treated his grandson better than he did the Jarvies. I don't know, answered Lord Henry. I fancy that the boy will be well off. He is not of age yet. He has Selby, I know. He told me so. And his mother was very beautiful. Margaret Devereux was one of the loveliest creatures I ever saw, Harry. What on earth induced her to behave as she did, I never could understand. She could have married anybody she chose. Carlington was mad after her. She was romantic, though. All the women of that family were. The men were a poor lot, but egad, the women were wonderful. Carlington went on his knees to her, told me so himself. She laughed at him. And there wasn't a girl in London at the time who wasn't after him. And by the way, Harry, talking about silly marriages, what is this humbug your father tells me about Dartmoor wanting to marry an American? Aren't English girls good enough for him? It is rather fashionable to marry Americans just now, Uncle George. I'll back English women against the world, Harry, said Lord Fermor, striking the table with his fist. The betting is on the Americans. They don't last, I'm told, muttered his uncle. A long engagement exhausts them, but they are capital at a steeplechase. They take things flying. I don't think Dartmoor has a chance. Who are her people? Grumbled the old gentleman. Has she got any? Lord Henry shook his head. American girls are as clever at concealing their parents as English women are at concealing their past, he said, rising to go. They're pork packers, I suppose. I hope so, Uncle George. For Dartmoor's sake, I am told that pork packing is the most lucrative profession in America, after politics. So in America, we have a saying called pork barrel spending. You know, could Oscar Wilde be picking on that? Probably. Is she pretty? She behaves as if she was beautiful. Most American women do. It is the secret of their charm. Pause. That's a great one. Behave like you're beautiful, people. That's the secret to your charm, right there. If you behave as if you were beautiful, people have to treat you as if you were beautiful. Maybe that's a secret to a lot of things in life, you know? Like maybe if you pretend that you're, you know, whatever it happens to be, people take you at face value and you become that thing. I don't know. She behaves as if she was beautiful. Most American women do. It is the secret of their charm. Why can't these American women stay in their own country? They're always telling us that it is a paradise for women. It is. That is the reason why, like Eve, they are so excessively anxious to get out of it, said Lord Henry. Goodbye, Uncle George. I shall be late for lunch if I stop any longer.